everybody. Okay, just gonna get started. Hello, hello. Hi again. Oh, I love that you now put on the swag.
Yeah.
It's all happening. Just
Totally.
gonna quit my iTunes. Just one sec. Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see everybody here. Kareen, so nice to have you. I'm just gonna do a quick intro, then we will get to the good stuff. So, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. And welcome to what I can't believe is actually the 13th installment of the Digital Campfire download. This is a series, as some of you know, where I talk to the creatives and the entrepreneurs who are building and stoking some of the world's most interesting digital campfires right now. I'm Sarah, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a digital content strategist based here in LA. I created the term digital campfire to describe a type of online destination that's more intimate, more private, and more interactive than public-facing social platforms. I launched this series to meet the creative and entrepreneurial forces behind hyper-engaged digital campfires with a goal to really get inside them and understand the strategies that really help them burn, especially in a time when there's so much uncertainty. I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce my guest today, but first, just a quick bit of housekeeping that the people who've joined before will be familiar with, but I do want to go over. I've muted all of you except for Kareen, obviously, so if you can't talk, that's why. The conversation is going to run about 45 minutes, 45, 50 minutes, and you're going to have the chance to ask questions at the end. Feel free to ask questions throughout the interview, though, and I will get to them at the end of the conversation. Just pop them into the chat. Most of you are familiar with how to do that by now. Or you can raise your hand and use a little raise hand feature, and I can help you come into the chat and ask the question yourself. Also note this is being recorded and it will be shared out afterwards. Lastly, I'm doing this from home like a lot of you. If we get disconnected, which has never happened before, just come on and dial back in. I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but you never know. So now on to my guest today. And so I first came across We're Not Really Strangers, or Winners, which I'm going to call it, on Instagram. I would see these visually arresting images of posters and billboards on anonymous city streets featuring these intimate statements like, stop carrying old feelings into new experiences, and don't resent someone for something you clearly haven't communicated. The images made me stop mid-scroll, like literally stop. In a sea of total sameness on Instagram, Winners really stood out. Turns out I wasn't alone in thinking this. Today, Winners has an audience of over 2 million on Instagram, and those intimate questions form the basis of the wildly successful We Are Not Strangers card game, which is really about how the simple act of asking questions can really bring about meaningful connection. The Instagram of the game is sort of part BFF, part life coach, which I love and we'll get into, but the game would not exist without an extremely engaged community. So here today to talk about the digital campfire at the heart of her game is Kareen O'Dinney. Please welcome. Hi. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, so it's Kareen O'Dinney.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay, great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. I've wanted to talk to you for so long because I've obviously been such a fan just watching what you've been doing. I really want to get into your experience building this community and ultimately building the game because it's fascinating. But first, I just want to introduce people a bit to the game itself for people here who, maybe on here and may not be as familiar as me. So can you tell us, like in your own words, what the game's all about, what the intention of it is, and kind of what it actually is, what the cards say, just a quick overview so we know.
Yeah, so it's a purpose-driven card game, and it's all about creating meaningful connections with people. And essentially, it's like a gateway for instant intimacy. And it's broken up into 3 levels, which is perception, connection, reflection. And then there's a final card, which tells you to write a note to your partner, and you fold an exchange and open only once you two have parted ways. So at the end of this game, you have a note to take away from either a stranger or someone that you've just connected with on a deeper level. And the intention behind it was really just to help. It was made initially for myself because I was always connecting with strangers through my camera and asking really deep questions, but my camera allowed me to do that because I was photographing, interviewing strangers. And then I found myself in my dating experiences being very afraid of vulnerability and not wanting to show any imperfections not wanting to sleep over because the next morning I wouldn't be all done up, like just really scared of kind of putting my facade down. So the game kind of came out of wanting to figure out a way for me to have an excuse to get deeper with people and put that mask down for a bit. And that was my tool.
I want to dive into that story. So tell us about the origin of the project. You were a photographer. Tell us about sort of how this evolved, because it's a super interesting story.
Yeah, so I started when I was really young. I was like 16 years old. I'd already been taking photos because I started doing that in middle school. 16 was that pivotal, like first heartbreak that happened for me. And the reason it was so pivotal is because taking photos was my way of like healing from it. I remember the day that like the guy I was dating, he moved because he was 18, I was 16. He was going off to do his life.
Yeah.
And after he left, I just had my camera on me. I was at his house and I ended up walking back home with my camera and photographing people. And that was just my escape. And it just kind of like, I was hooked from that point on and was starting to ask strangers, do you ever get over your first love? Because that was the question I was Googling. I was like, will I ever get over this person? And then the answers on Google were like so bleak, like, no, I don't think you'll ever, like, it was just so negative. So I decided, and you know, like anytime you Google your problems, I feel like you encounter that.
Right. It's a recipe for maybe not the best like advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And you always go into it with like such high hopes. Like it's going to make me feel better. And it did. But so I ended up just going out on the streets of Ventura Boulevard and asking strangers the same question. And I felt way better. I felt way more connected, way more perspective, felt way less alone. And from there, I got over that first love and started asking new questions and kind of also fell in love with the idea that questions are an art form. And like, if you skew a question just a little bit or add one word to it, or take one word out, you're able to get so much more from a person. Started developing that, doing it. And that's, long story short, that's what led to me meeting a stranger who ended up giving me the name for the project.
Yeah, so tell us about that moment, about that. And by the way, like you just sort of skimmed over this idea of you walking up to complete strangers, which would be a huge blocker, I think, for a lot of people walking down Ventura. You were cool with it. It's just something that you never had issues with. Clearly.
Yeah, at the time, like I feel like these days, I don't know how to put it other than I feel like everyone can relate in their own way of like, we do things sometimes that now looking back, we're like, I don't know how I did that or why I did that. It just felt so natural. Like it wasn't even like, you don't even think twice about it. And there were times where I felt uncomfortable, but it also felt like exactly the thing I should be doing. And I didn't feel brave or anything. I just felt like this is what I want to do. And I felt compelled to do it. Which I think is like a big testament to like when you're in a flow or like doing what you feel you're supposed to be doing, things that might seem impossible to someone else, like flow naturally to you. And I think that's what I was experiencing at the time. Because today, if I were to like yesterday, we have these bumper stickers we made and we had to go up to strangers and ask them like, can we put this on your car just for a quick photo? And I was so nervous to do that. I was terrified.
Wow.
So now maybe it's all being quarantined and stuff. Like I have almost more like social shyness. But at the time it was very like, that was just what I did.
Right. You were just no holds barred. So, okay. So you're walking up, one of the people ends up giving you the name of this game. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I was doing it for a while, this photographing and interviewing, posting on my Instagram, which at the time was @chickensandwaffles was my handle. So it was just
@chickens and waffles. Okay.
Yeah. Just like my humor, like, okay, I was probably like 15 when I made that account. And yeah, so I would photograph people and then I would hashtag it waffleography. Like that was my photography series name. It was like this thing I did and I just was doing it for fun. But I would interview people who were homeless, like all types of like a range of people. And the interviews would get into topics of like love and like beautiful things like that. But then also addiction and all of that. So it was kind of becoming like the name was not fitting anymore and I was outgrowing it. And a couple of my friends sat me and were like, hey, Kareen, like, what are your thoughts on that name? Like, I think maybe we should think of something better. And I was like, I don't know, but like, I don't know what to call it. And then one day, a stranger that I photographed in downtown, at the end of our interview told me that I would write a book and it would be called We're Not Really Strangers. And that's literally like at the end, like at the beginning though, he told me he was reading poetry, and I approached him, and I always asked, like, what's your name and what are you passionate about? And he told me his passions were Jesus and Israel, which I thought was really interesting because I'm from Israel, so he didn't know that. But then he told me he liked poetry and all of this. So we were just getting into his life story, but he was also like super stoic and like, so I knew, I was like, I'm gonna keep this short with him. Like, I even remember like not getting the photos right. I was like, oh my God, I'm not getting this photo. And but he was nice. And at the very end, before I walked off, he just kind of left me with that name and went back to read.
He just dropped this gift.
Yeah, he was super. And I honestly didn't even know if I liked it that much at the time. I was
Yeah.
just like, oh yeah, we're not really strangers. Cool. Like, thank you.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So now you have a name, something you may
Yeah.
use, may not use. You have this sort of passion for talking to people, but then there's a huge leap to actually building a product, a game. How did that evolve? And what was that process?
Yeah, so that process was just a very long journey. It was probably
Mm-hmm.
like a few years, 4 years or so of,
Okay.
so I had this name, I had this thing I love to do. And then for a long time, I was just in a really weird spot of like, okay, I'm passionate about We're Not Really Strangers. I started building out a deck of what it could be. The first iteration of it was I wanted to build a photo sharing platform where we would archive people's photos under like human emotion. So you would go on notreallystrangers.com and like Google love, and like all the photos from around the world with interviews about love would come up, or like whatever the emotion is. And the way it would work is like you would log on and we would walk you through how to photograph and interview a stranger. And that was my idea. And then what happened though is like I realized that people don't really want to do that, and like that's not a normal thing to want to do.
Right.
And so I was like really fighting to like get these photo journal, like I would find these photographers and DM them and be like, I love this photo. Do you think you can track down this person and get an interview with them with like keywords? And they're like, sure, I'll try, but what is this for? And so it was like a fight. It wasn't flowing.
Right.
And so it one day, just I was in bed, it was around Valentine's Day. I remember I was just so like bummed out. I was like, oh, I had this love for We're Not Really Strangers, but I have nothing to show for it. And it kind of just occurred to me. I was in bed and I was like, you know, it would be cool is if I took the questions I asked people, but had complete strangers asking each other those questions. And I texted this random stranger that I met at a cafe probably a few weeks earlier, because he told me he makes documentaries. So I texted him and told him that idea. And I was like, would you help me film this over the weekend? And he said yes. So that was really nice of him, because I know he's very busy. And we went out to a park and I wrote out all the questions on index cards. We got strangers sitting out in the park. We're like, hey, would you want to play? Would you want to play? We sat them across from each other and they started asking each other the questions. But the pivotal moment really was the first card said, what is your name? And Brandon, who was helping me film that day, urged me, he was like, make it, what do you think my name is? And I was like, that's not, I don't like that. Why? And he's like, just trust me, just trust me. And we fought on it and I just let him do it. And as I was sitting with the headphones and like listening to people ask each other that question, I found that that was almost like one of the most interesting parts was like strangers like challenge this story or this assumption that they've made. So like someone might look at me and be like, you look like blah, 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 or some random name. And it's like, okay, well, why? Why did I give you that impression?
Right.
From there, I went home and I was like, okay, what do you think my name is could be? What was your first impression of me? It could be, do you think I fall in love easily? Why or why not? These are all things that when you look at someone, you can kind of almost like paint a story of who you think they are. And level one. So I didn't know this would be a level, but it started kind of coming to me that it could be the stage of something where you assume something and then I can either say, yes, you're right, or give you the true answer, and you can kind of learn how your assumptions can be very wrong or sometimes accurate. And then so I was like, okay, that could be level one, let's say perception. Level two then would be connection. And those would be all the questions that I ask people. So it's like, what's the most pain you've ever been in that wasn't physical? Or how are you really? All those questions could fit in there nicely. And I have a lot of those. And then level three, I was like, okay, there's perception, connection, now you have to reflect. So that'll be reflection.
Mm-hmm.
It all rhymed. I was like, that's perfect. But then it took me a long time to figure out how to like further gamify it and add wild cards and all these elements. Cause I didn't just want it to be questions. I wanted it to feel like,
Yeah. So talk about that, because we see a ton of these, right? Like 36 questions to fall in love, like went crazy viral from the New York Times a few years ago. And it was compelling, but this is different. And
yeah.
so why was it important for you to bring that gamified element?
Yeah, so I remember the moment I heard about 36 questions. I was working a catering job. I was probably like 18 years old or something.
Mm-hmm.
And someone came up to me, and I had already kind of like been doing the photography stuff. So I was probably talking to someone about that. They're like, oh, have you heard of 36 questions? And I was like, no, what is that? And they told me about it. And I remember thinking that was the coolest thing in the world because it was so in line with like what I found
Yeah.
interesting. So I definitely like looked at that and got inspired by it. But the thing is with 36 questions, it's about falling in love. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more to human connection than like that intimate side or just falling in love with one another. It's about connection with your family, with your friends, with yourself. There's so many different lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's of course table topics and all those types of games with a bunch of questions. But I think what I always saw lacking was like that gamification element of it. Like, how do
Yeah.
you really make it an experience where you're not just drawing cards, but you're going through, I kind of like see it as a movie. Like when I was designing out the questions, I was like, okay, I know the emotion I want for level 1. I want a lot of laughs, a lot of what, a lot of, oh my God, what, really? Like that kind of vibe was level 1. Level 2, I can kind of see it becoming more emotional and people breaking down their barriers. And level 3, you feel warm, you feel seen, you feel validated. So it was
Mm.
like, I really wanted to hit those scene, or not scenes, what do you call those
Those
acts in a
core
movie.
feelings. Sorry,
Yeah,
say again.
like acts in a movie, and also those core
Yeah.
feelings, like you said. And
Yeah.
then the final card. So to me, it was just, I don't know what it was. I guess I already saw question games exist. I was passionate about questions, but I wanted to do it in a way that that I was excited about and that I would really want to participate in.
It's so interesting. And I think the exact thing you just said about sort of leading with the emotion and having that dictate the sort of shape of the product
Mm-hmm.
is such a lesson for anyone designing a product or thinking about building any kind of community around that product, because the emotion is going to dictate how people connect with it. I mean, if you've taken a look at the video on the site, which I watched again and again, the one where people are actually sitting across from each other at what looks like Santa Monica or Palisades Park, just talking. And there was this one moment that just really struck me. I mean, there's many moments, but this woman said to this man, I'm telling you things that I don't tell anybody. Very few people know this about me. And actually, even as I say this, like I get emotional because it was such a powerful moment that I think we've all been in to a certain extent in certain situations in our life, but such rare ones. And it takes the fact that was engendered by a card deck between two strangers is pretty extraordinary. And I think so rare especially for a brand like you. I mean, you see Coca-Cola doing that? Like, no, right? Or you could, but it would be so rare. Maybe if they're lucky. So it's just I wanted to call that out because I think that putting emotion at the center of what you're building is a really powerful tool. Really, really powerful.
You articulated that perfectly. I love that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I had never thought of it like acts of a play or a movie, but that's like super true. It's really, really true. So it sounds like the bigger vision was kind of there, but you had to kind of evolve the product around it. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the product just built over many, many years. And there was always that element of like, it felt ready to a lot of people that I would play it with. And like, oh, why haven't you put it out? Why haven't you put it out? And it became almost, I would say, like embarrassing. Like people were like, oh, you're working on that card game. So it kind of drove me a little bit to like, let me just put this thing out there. But for a long time, I was just developing it and not wanting to put it out because I didn't feel it was ready. Like one detail that changed very last minute was the dig deeper cards in the game. So the game comes with transparent cards that say dig deeper.
Okay.
You can use it once per level to encourage transparency. So let's say I'm playing with you and I ask you, how are you? And you're like, oh, I'm good. So I could pull a dig deeper card. So it urges you to get more in your feelings, essentially. Those are called bullshit cards. So they were like these black cards that said bullshit. So throw it down. And those are funny, but I always felt like that doesn't feel quite right. Like it doesn't feel like on brand, like maybe for like a Cards Against Humanity collab or something,
right?
It would be bullshit cards. But for this, it didn't feel right. But it didn't come to me until like much, much later. I remember I was on Instagram once and I saw someone holding up like a transparent thing. Like, I don't know what it was, but I was like, wait, what if the cards were transparent? And it was like, it came to me so last minute though. So there's so many elements that like it took me spending years and procrastinating putting it out, because in that procrastination time, I was able to see things that came together for the final product.
You were able to make connections. I did want to call that out as well, because I think we're so rushed in this world to scale quickly when we think about building products or building audiences. And you scaled slowly, and it was such a testament to doing that and what the power of that can be. At what point, I mean, was there a moment where you were like, oh my God, we're onto something, once you did put it out, or even before?
The times of before, I'm like, I definitely deal with a lot of like self-doubt and like to this day. So at the time, the things that helped me be like, oh, maybe I'm onto something, maybe this is something people would care about besides just me, was like, I would have friends, one friend in particular who would always pick up, I had one prototype, like one game, and she would always pick it up before going to a date. And then sometimes be really out of her way to like come pick up this thing and go on a date. And I was like, that's like that says something if she's doing that, you know? So
yeah,
little moments like that were little hints for me. But for the most part, anytime people were like, oh, this is really good, you should put it out, I, in the back of my head was like, they don't know what they're talking about. It's only because I'm with them as I'm playing that the game makes sense. Like I had this big fear that if I wasn't in the room, the gameplay wouldn't make sense or they'd be confused. So a lot of self-doubt. And I think what really helped me was my boyfriend, who I'm still with today. He met me before I'd put it out. I was still working on it. And he really urged me to kind of see it as like, just put it out and learn. He's really good at like, he's been in business for 10 years and has like kind of put a lot of like, learned a lot of those lessons, but he's really good at seeing failure as information rather than like a devastation, which is something I'm working on, like setbacks, whatever you want to call it. So he's like, put it out and learn. Like you'll see what this will be, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it was I just had to like close my eyes and let go, you know?
And jump a little bit. Yeah.
And it was becoming that thing where everyone in my life knew that this is what I was working on. So it was going to get more embarrassing to not put it out than to put it out. It like became like that.
Right. You're like, we just have to do this. Like we just have to hold my nose and do this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the community that's at the heart of this game, and then kind of the power of it. Did you intentionally nurture that from the start? Was that part of the overall vision? Like, I want to understand where that factored in, where that came in for you.
Yeah. So what happened was, I was about to put the game out, and there was this very clear thing happening with social media that everyone knows about, which is like when you want to create a business or something, you want to have a platform ideally that helps you communicate your why and like communicate your product. But I just didn't have that. And at the time, I don't know how many followers I had on my personal account, but that was from more my modeling days. So it wasn't the kind of audience that would really resonate with this anyways.
And just to be clear, you were a model and you funded this 3-year, 4-year period of game development with that, right?
Yeah, like even the day that I met that stranger that gave me We're Not Really Strangers, I was at a modeling job walking to my car after.
Got it.
So it was all through those times, which I feel very grateful for that. Even when I was taking photos, that's when I got scouted, was when I was taking photos of strangers right after high school. So it was it worked together really well. And what were we talking about?
Oh, you were saying about in nurturing the community, and you had your personal platform, but that didn't really jive with, who was,
Yeah. And I had this really big, massive influencer who I knew his business manager, who this is so wild, I'm just remembering this, but I met his business partner manager the same day I met the guy that helped me film the first video. It was the same day at the same cafe. I kind of like encountered with them. And he ended up reaching out to me. I didn't meet him for the first time at that cafe, but I'd met him a while later at like this program I was at. It was like this weird, I'm just realizing how connected that was. But he introduced me to the influencer he was working with, and they wanted to take essentially 50% and help me blow up We're Not Really Strangers. That was the deal.
Can you say who it is?
I'd rather not. Yeah, I'd rather not.
Okay, no problem. I got to ask.
Yeah, I'd rather not, but so yeah, that was the opportunity he presented me with, and it was really tempting because in my head, that's how you make it. You have a huge star, a huge influencer promote your product. So I went home, was talking to my friends about it, talked to my boyfriend about it, just kind of really reflecting. And it kind of occurred to me that as tempting as that was, and as much as it felt like a shortcut, it didn't fully feel right. So I had to say no, I had to pass. But then I was left with this thing of like, okay, so now what? Like, how do I build a platform? How do I
Mm-hmm.
create some sort of community? And I thought back to Simon Sinek, who's helped a
Yeah.
lot think of like community building for me. I watched his TED Talk probably in high school or like around that time. He talks about start with why, like don't promote your product, promote your why. So I thought about the themes of We're Not Really Strangers, which is vulnerability, connection, all of those things, shame, all of that. And I was like, okay, there's an opportunity to create artwork around these themes that I can share on Instagram. So like I remember around Valentine's Day, my friend went out and started wheat pasting, like, do you still miss him? And started putting that on electric post. Or like, whose name are you looking for in your Insta story views? And pasting them all around. Or like, has a stranger ever changed your life? Like all these questions. And I remember one of my favorite Tumblr blogs reposted one of them. And my mind was blown. I was like, whoa, something we can create can be shared by someone that I follow and like love so much. And that gave me a little boost. And that's kind of how it started. I just started posting this artwork and putting it together and learning Photoshop and learning how to take text off of something and put my own text on it. And that kind of just evolved. I remember I made a typo on one of the wheat paste things that we did outside. And it occurred to me I can fix it on Photoshop. And I was like, oh wait, this could scale much quicker if I'm not. My friends and my friend Iman, who I still work with, she was helping me wheat paste. It was like, instead of us going out and like feeling terrified in the middle of the night trying to put these things up, Photoshop it. So it just started growing, or not growing. I just started making a bunch of stuff essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even talk about the game because I was still developing the game and still not knowing when it would launch. But
And you launched on this handle. You actually got the handle. This is actually doing this content on that We're Not Really Strangers handle, right?
yeah,
On Instagram. Okay.
yeah, I've had the handle for so long. Again,
Yeah.
because
So you started that, but it was disconnected from the game. It was got it.
yeah,
It was its own thing. Got it.
it
Because yeah,
was
I remember encountering that before. Like there was, I even knew about a game. Got
Yeah.
it.
So a lot of people now think that the game came after, like I built this community and then I created a game, but it was really, I created a game, built this community to help attract the people who would understand what the game is
Hmm.
and then brought them the game, you know,
That's
so that.
that's a really, and it's an interesting distinction because I definitely would have been in that camp that thought you created the community before, then birthed the game, but you kind of reverse engineered it. But you did it in a really intentional, interesting way. You said something when we spoke a few months ago that really resonated with me. I was asking about community, and you said, "Yeah, I didn't really think about like a community. That didn't like inspire me, like developing one. It was more, how can I develop authentic connections with people, or something like that. That's more interesting to me. Like it's
Yeah.
more about it's yeah. Can you speak to that a bit if you remember at all what you were referring to?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think what I said, but maybe it was like what I meant is like I didn't start it thinking like I want to build this community. It was intentional, but it also was not. I didn't really know what I was doing or how it would grow. I knew I had goals. I knew that like I remember thinking legitimate brands had 1,000 likes on images. I just thought like if you launch a product, you have like around 1,000 likes, you're legitimate. So that was my goal. And then when I hit that many likes, I was like, okay, well now it just the numbers of it grew because I was kind of setting these goals. But really what was happening and the thing that um is really interesting to me from just like a human level is how people talk about like wanting to work with influencers or all those things, but really like we are so influential to the people in our lives. So if someone sees something and wants to share with their friend, that's the biggest compliment and the huge, like that's the most interesting thing and the most powerful thing, because that's how things actually grow. So when I create something, I want to make it really personal so it can touch someone really personally so that they can want to tell someone about it. And that was the
So
thing,
interesting. Yeah.
you know, that I found to be um, a big focus. Like I did a poll once. I do these polls I want to do them more regularly, but I used to do them a lot more at the beginning where I was going through, let's say, anxiety or feeling invasive thoughts or like these really dark emotions I was going through. So I decided to make a poll to see like who was feeling that. So like, how are you feeling today? Are you experiencing anxiety? Are you experiencing invasive thoughts? Are you experiencing something you're too afraid to talk about? Like really personal questions. And I found the majority of people were saying yes to those questions. And it immediately made me feel less alone. And that was kind of, again, like the feeling I was trying to create with every post is like make it really personal and put that out there. And then if I'm feeling it, most likely someone else is feeling that same way, and that's the thing
Yeah.
that helps you grow as a brand. I don't know, everyone has their own version of it, but how can you be really personal? Because that'll touch someone in a personal way.
Yeah. It's very true. It's like it's sort of what everyone wants. It's like, you get me, you see me, I feel like you understand me. And I feel like all of your messaging really expresses that in
Yeah.
a just a stylish way, in addition to being like a very intimate way. Something that I've observed is that, intimacy hypercharges or sort of pours fuel on the fire of community. Like, I definitely noticed that the communities that tap into intimacy and revealing nature, sides of ourselves, really connect on a much deeper level for what you would think is obvious reasons, but it's not always the case, right? Is that something you knew instinctively was going to happen, or something you learned?
Knew that like that theme would catch on, or like,
Yeah, that theme would really help to like supercharge and really grow your, customer base. I want to talk about that in a sec, but your audience, all of it.
no, I don't think I knew. No, I don't think I knew. I think you learn that. Like I learned that as I
Yeah.
went. You kind of see like, okay, when I talk about breakups, that's really everyone feels that theme like on a deep level.
Hmm.
Talk about certain things, but I had to learn that as I went. And a lot of times things that you think will work like don't really work that well, and then you have to try something new. So I think it's a lot of just, instead of thinking like what's going to work or what are people going to react to, just think like what am I going to react to, what am I feeling, what feels really honest to me, and lead
Right.
with that, because it's hard to guess other people.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So yeah, talk a little bit about what's worked, what hasn't, in terms of where you've shown up. So what channels does the community primarily live on? Obviously Instagram is one, but you also have this really robust text channel, which you use. You said it was 25,000 people last time I spoke. Is that still the case? It's probably grown.
Yeah,
And then
no,
you have TikTok. Yeah,
yeah.
so go ahead.
Yeah, so all of that, yeah, so TikTok and the community, which is the texting platform, has been huge and really interesting and fun because again, it's like starting new. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really interesting that the text numbers have grown a lot. We're at almost 100K now numbers.
What?
Yeah, so the community has grown substantially. And it's really cool. It's a really awesome platform where again, just a lot of people are like, oh, is this automated? And I guess in a sense it is, because every day I'm sending it to a massive group of people, but it's really me thinking about it like the day of, or like overthinking it. You know what I mean? Like the day,
Yeah.
what's going to be the quote for today? I usually like write some new ones and then put out the one that feels the most authentic. And then I go back and try to respond with my team to as many people as possible. Sometimes like leave voice memos back. Like people will be like, wait, what? This is a
Wait,
human?
what? Okay, wait. We have to dig in on this, because this is, for
Yeah.
people to know, this is using text as a channel to communicate. And you
Yeah.
have do you even list your number on your Instagram? Like, where do people find it?
Yeah. So we don't list it on our Instagram, but on TikTok, it kind of like, we put it in our bio.
Okay, so you put your number in your bio, people text you, they're signed up for your text, and you are writing those every day in addition to your Instagram and your TikTok. And then people can write back, and it's a one-to-one communication. You're saying you leave them voice memos?
Sometimes. So like, it's just
Yeah.
one way of responding,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? To make it feel, just to remind people like,
Highly.
this isn't a robot. Like this is
Yeah.
we're people. Sometimes we can't respond to everyone, of course, but we try our best to
Yeah.
leave that personal
Yeah.
touch.
Yeah, no, it's really different, because I'm signed up for a lot of texts, and that's not how a lot of influencers connect. It's meant to be that way, and I think it's designed to be that way, but it doesn't end up necessarily being that way. Can you talk a little bit about the interplay between the Instagram and the game? I know you mentioned polls, you do, different things, but how specifically do you leverage the following to develop questions, sort of spark more interest in the game?
Something that's been happening recently is like I'll be on TikTok responding to comments or Instagram, and I'll see a comment asking a question, and that can inspire like a quote or something.
Yeah.
Like the other day we did something about like we put on a door like thank you for coming into my life, like on the outside, and then thank you for walking out of my life, like on the side. And someone commented like, well, what if like, and I captioned it like, if people want to leave, let them. Like that's just like a theme I'm really big about, is like nothing forced, And someone commented like, well, what if they come back? And it made me think like, yeah, like I've been in that circumstance before where someone has left me and I'm like so distraught, but then they come back and it's like, and you're so happy about it. And then it was this idea of like, it occurred to me and I commented back, I was like, well, just because someone comes back into your life doesn't mean you have to let them back in. And that's a completely different thing. That's like, you have to decide that for yourself. And that ended up becoming like the theme of the next post. So I think that's a cool thing about community, TikTok, Instagram, all that is because I'm so glued to my phone, like in a lot of ways that's probably not healthy and like I need to work on that. But for the development side and the creativity side, it helps me a lot just to be really in tune and reading all the comments and stuff, because it inspires me or reminds me of something I went through. Because the TikTok audience, for example, is so much younger.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's like I'm not just talking to the 24 or what was it, 18 to 24-year-olds, which was like the biggest demographic on Instagram at the time. And now it's becoming a broader range of like even younger people. So,
yeah, it's clearly connecting. You're connecting. I mean, you're sort of the same types of questions are actually connecting with that younger demographic. I do want to talk about your Instagram engagement just a little more detail for a moment, because it's off the charts. Like when you look, I mean, for those of you who haven't like looked up your account, I just took the time and did that in CrowdTangle, which is a tool that I use to look at accounts. Like you don't see engagement like yours. Certainly not for a brand. I mean, I put it against things like, Coca-Cola, even Nike, whatever. Like it's not, there's no comparison. It's massive celebrities like Justin Bieber have way less engagement than you. Selena Gomez, Beyonce, like truly. So, I mean,
their brand accounts,
their main, their accounts like Beyonce, like the Beyonce account, like that's even though individuals tend to do better on Instagram versus brands. You're Not Strangers is a brand, but the engagement suggests and sort of it looks much more on par with a huge influencer like a Billie Eilish or Addison Rae. I mean, it's crazy. So anyway, congrats on that. But it's really cool to see. And I think anyone would kill for that. So why do you think your specific community is so engaged? And then can you talk about some of the tactics that have gotten you there?
Yeah. So I think something that has helped tremendously is like back to what I was saying about sharing or shareability. It's like creating something, which I think is becoming like way more understood now. But when I create something, I want it to be something someone feels personally and then wants to share with their friends. So a lot of the comments are like, how do you know I'm going through this? Or like, are you especially on Twitter, like I'll tweet things out a lot of times just to see what the response will be. It's almost like the testing ground for things I'll use in other places. And people will just be like, are you a spy? Like, how do you know I'm going through this right now? Or like, I just got off the phone with an ex. How did you know? And I think it's just because it's very personal or things that I've experienced or might be experiencing in that exact moment. And that's when I'm putting it out versus like, I think a lot of people might, I don't know, there's nothing wrong with it. And we might have to resort to this as well, but like putting things in a calendar and like writing a bunch of things in advance for down the line. But for me, I really like the creativity to be not so planned, and just the morning of or the night of, I might think of something, and that's the thing I want to go with. And just keeping it, I think it's just advice, just keeping it something to give others. It would just be making it extremely personal is the best piece of advice. I would just make it really honest to you, really true to you. And also have a group of people that can tell you when your ideas are bad. Something that I'm really grateful for is I have an amazing team. And what we do is we have a Whack Attack group chat where I will send an idea or they might send an idea and the group will tell you if it's good or if it's whack attack. And we're really honest with each other, and a lot of my ideas get shut down. And I think that's been really helpful though, because you just never know. Like you might think something is great, but until you share it with other eyes that are objective, you have no idea.
It's such good advice. I've actually seen some brands do that. Like I'm pretty sure Chipotle has a small group chat, like where they tested against like Gen Z boys, which is like their demo.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I mean, this is like, yeah, I've heard this. And it's a really cool little thing. And it's sort of like, you can replicate that. Like what you're saying is essentially a test group that gets you and gets your brand and can call bullshit. And I think that's replicable for anyone. So clever marketing has really been part of how you've gotten the word out from the get-go. Can you tell me about some of your more successful marketing initiatives? Like I saw the chair this week. I thought that was really interesting, or last week. You know, what about some of the very successful ones and maybe some of the not so successful ones?
You're talking about like specifically product launches?
I'm actually, like marketing around, like thoughtful marketing around your product. So I mentioned there was like the chair. I think you like sold up
this chair.
Wait, what is it? Let me see.
It was you're gonna want to sit down for this chair.
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I just saw that and I heard that like went viral. So I want to understand what that was.
Yeah. So basically with that, it was really
maybe explain it a little bit so people know.
Yeah. So we've created a couple like digital PDFs. Like, so when quarantine first happened, we created a quarantine PDF to help people connect virtually. And so we did that. And then that was really successful. We got a lot of downloads on that. And then with the news of George Floyd and all of that was happening, we had to decide how are we going to respond constructively. Like it was very emotional and we wanted to figure out something that we can contribute. So the idea of creating a race and privilege expansion pack kind of happened. It was really scary to put out because it's such a touchy topic, but that was the idea. It was like, okay, it's scary, but we're going to go for it. And showing up imperfectly is better than not showing up at all. And all those kind of ideas started coming because that conversation is so intimidating, obviously, for many reasons for so many people, but it's also important to have. So we came out with that expansion pack. We came out with a shirt that says if a conversation is hard, it's probably the one worth having. And that was a whole theme, was like embracing hard conversations. And even if you're uncomfortable, putting yourself forward and because it's the right thing to do. Like that was the theme we were exploring. And so the idea of this chair that would accompany those things. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
A chair that would accompany those things kind of was the natural fit, like a chair that says you're going to want to sit down for this, for the hard conversations, the most uncomfortable chair you'll ever sit in. And it comes with a sticker that says warning, discomfort may arise. So we did a drop of that and the chair sold out, which was really shocking. What really happened was we made the chair as a way to promote I forgot what it was. I think it was the shirt that we were coming out with. And then a bunch of people were saying, where can I get the chair? So we were like, oh, okay. So I guess we should make the chair. And we ended up making them recently and they sold out.
That's totally genius. And I love how it totally captures the line that your brand walks between analog and digital. Like a lot of your tactics are really the antithesis of digital. They're really, really squarely analog, posters on street corners or pictures of posters on street corners, etc.
Yeah.
I had a friend mention that it's sort of Banksy style. And I feel like that's the vibe where you look, what's that?
Banksy is just like the king, but yeah.
Right. And just in terms of that, it was like this guerrilla analog meets digital sort of thoughtfulness. And I think that, that's just a really interesting factor in your success and one that not a lot of brands take advantage of. I think we live both online and off. And I think it's important to get at customers, audience, community in both places. And I think your brand really gets at that. So of course, what tools and platforms are you experimenting with? So obviously you mentioned, TikTok, you have texting, you have obviously your Instagram, and which one of those are really, do you see, is there anything new that you're playing with?
I think TikTok is the newest one that I'm figuring out, and it feels like really the beginning of like when I was doing Instagram, like what worked, like you kind of learn the language of a platform. I feel like
Yes,
you
very
kind of
much so.
you're on it enough, and then you start slowly realizing what works and what doesn't. And at first you're like, why is this working? And then you're like, oh, you begin to understand why. So now on TikTok, I feel like a beginner again, which is
Yeah,
cool, which is also intimidating, but like really important. So yeah, I would say TikTok is huge. I think that
a
it's,
huge one. Yeah.
yeah, and it's really just such a different audience. That's what's so
Yes.
exciting about it, is it's not like, oh, all our Instagram followers came to TikTok. Actually, like a lot of our Instagram, like I posted a carousel of like people. There was a TikTok challenge that kind of happened. We did a face filter for TikTok, and a challenge came out of it where people would play this like sad song, and like the cards would flicker on their head and land on one. And it was like this interesting series of like, you can see where their eyes shift from like being on camera and like being on TikTok to like really going into like their human emotions. And it was really
Hmm.
cool. And a lot of the comments were like, bring this to Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. Like I'm not on TikTok. So I don't think a lot of people are even transitioning there. I think it's just a
Right.
audience being born
It's
over
a
there.
brand new one. Did I see the massive influencer Emma Chamberlain do that? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. She just did it? Like you
Yeah.
didn't pay her.
No. We didn't pay her. I don't know her.
Wow.
I'm just very grateful for Emma
That's
Chamberlain.
bananas. Yeah, that's crazy. So I want to start taking questions. So if you guys have questions, just start popping them in the chat and I'll start taking them and I'll just continue to ask you in the meantime. So a lot of communities think about how to value their MVPs, their most valuable players, the people who are most active in their, in their groups and communities. Are you thinking about that at all? Like, are there any, things that you're doing to reach out to smaller groups, whether that are sort of more obsessed with your product than others, or people who you see as potentially knowing, having some insights that maybe you wouldn't be able to get just because your community is now so big?
No. So can you explain that to me a little more? So
Yeah.
MVP, I don't understand, because no.
Yeah, like most valuable, like MVPs, most valuable players, like the people in a community who are like the most engaged, the most, active, whether it's on your Instagram all the time commenting. I've seen some digital campfires really prioritize those people and find ways to really thank them on a consistent basis, whether it's with like digital rewards like badges or cool little virtual gifts or actual real ones where they feel valued. Even little things like putting them in a smaller text group to make them feel more special, and they get more consistent communication, for example. I just wondered if you had anything like that.
I
And it's
love
fine if you don't.
No, yeah, to be honest, we don't have that specifically at the moment. I think when I hear that, I see an opportunity to embrace that and grow into that more. Also, at the same time, what we do is more just like my time is just like when I think of MVP, it's just like like, it's not like one particular person or a few particular people who are like the stars, but it's more just like whoever's engaging with us. Like I do try my best to like respond to DMs, respond to those
Yeah.
moments. And even on the text messages, like again, like I can't respond to everyone, but like picking a few people as regularly as possible and just going back and forth and like actually respond, like giving that person time, I think is our version of that at the moment. But moving forward, I definitely want to look into like more.
Yeah,
I
we can
don't
talk
know.
about it like after. It's just I've seen that be really interesting, and also as a way to really connect and listen to what they want. So like they might be hearing, like they might be doing things with the game that you don't even know,
Mhm.
and in really taking it in cool directions. And I've just seen, you sort of have like a group of people who are like your ears and eyes, because it's once it gets big, it's hard to
Mhm.
know that, right? So there might be cool opportunities there. Just that's
I love that.
something. Yeah,
Thank
for sure. Um, yeah, I'm going to start to take questions just 1 second. So can you mention or talk about the sales of the game at all, or give us any insights into that? Because we talked a lot about your audience growth, your engagement. I don't know what you can share, so whatever you feel
Yeah.
comfortable.
To be honest, I don't know what I can share either. I'm like, I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, we sales have been really amazing, honestly. Like I don't know if I'll give necessarily like numbers, but um we've also noticed a big influx in retail. Like I was never in any stores or anything like that. That was like this taboo thing. And now we're in Urban Outfitters, which is really cool, and have a really
Hmm.
big retailer coming out 2021 that will be a surprise.
Okay.
But yeah, really sales have been incredible. And again, like when I first launched, Iman, she works with me, she's in the room, but she was with me when we took the games from pre-order. Like we took it off of pre-order. And I remember the biggest goal was to sell 9 games a day. And I was like, that's the magic right there. And it immediately started selling more than that. And today it's like, if you were to have told me like the amount of games we're selling
Yeah.
now, I wouldn't believe it.
Wow, that's amazing. What do you think some of the biggest challenges have been in building this? I mean, it sounds like there were some real roadblocks early on mentally for you, but as it's evolved, what have been, would you say, like the biggest challenge?
I think there've been a few, and I think there've been a lot of like one that comes to mind immediately, so I'm not like sitting here thinking for too long.
Okay.
Is I think people dynamics change as you're like building things. Like I work with a best friend and I work with my boyfriend, and kind of it's been interesting to evolve like our relationships, and I'm so grateful that it has flowed so naturally and like worked so well. But I think there's just been a lot of like internal fear of, there's a question in the game that's like, what are you more afraid of, failure or success, and why? And I think when you hear that question, everyone's like, oh, I'm just afraid of failure. But in reality, like, yes, of course, I want to succeed, and failure is scarier. But there is something to success where it's like, as you grow and as things grow, things change. And a lot of times people don't realize that with failure, sometimes it stays the same. You're the same. Versus success, a lot of things grow and evolve, and you have to grow and evolve, and you have to become better. And I think as this has grown, luckily it's made my relationship stronger, but it has also been it takes a lot of honest conversation. It takes a lot of moments of like, okay, I have to be vulnerable here. I have to tell you how I'm feeling and bring up those uncomfortable things. And I think when you're in a good relationship, or a good relationship, romantic or friend, it's like when you're able to bring up those hard topics, you feel closer afterwards. I think that's always a good indicator, versus in the past, I would bring something up, I would feel further apart or more misunderstood. So I think that, and also just the other thing that comes to mind is like getting out of my own way and like learning. It's also been really humbling. Like a lot of times the things that I think are so right, and like I used to work on this on my own, so I would make decisions and be like, this is it, this is the decision. And then like sometimes the things that I think are right are actually super wrong, or like not even good ideas, or like are slowing us down for no good reason. And like kind of the humility of like just how much I don't know, and how important it is to lean on other people.
Yeah, those are two like extremely good lessons for any founder. So Ezra's asking a question, and I'll read it back to you. It seems a lot of the questions and responses you are getting from your community are pretty personal in nature. Do you see yourself now in the role of counselor, therapist? Do you feel a different kind of responsibility to them, especially when they're sharing emotionally difficult stories? And I think it's also important to say that your whole community has come up and taken hold in a time when mental health awareness and essentially a destigmatization has been taking place kind of globally, culturally, in a large scale way. So that's kind of happened in tandem. But this is a fantastic question, I think, gets at that and what your role is.
Yeah, so something I always say, and I think it's important to mention, is I'm not an expert. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have any background or degree. I'm 25 years old. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that I don't know. And I make that really clear and like try to like say as often as possible, because I don't want to be seen as that. I think for me, what I view it as is I'm as honest as I can. I show up honestly, and that's the thing I can contribute, and I can give advice from my personal experience. And when I see like questions that I feel like I can really comment on, I'll respond. And then when there are things that I feel like this is not my lane, I don't respond. And there's always that, like, you have to balance that. But yeah, I try to take that pressure off myself by just knowing that all you can do is all you can do, you know, and it's okay that I don't have like the expert advice for everything. I think people come to We're Not Really Strangers more so to feel validated for what they're feeling, because I'm feeling it. It's not so much like here's a prescription for you, or like here's the answer for you. It's more, here are the questions I'm posing for you, and you get to reflect on yourself or with yourself.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. One question from David: can you talk a little bit about content planning? Is it more run and gun idea to post, or is there scheduling? It sounded from what you said like you're basically just doing it off the cuff, but I
Yeah.
can't imagine that's for everything, is it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
No, that's the thing that we're working on. Like that's literally the conversation we were having yesterday, Keaton and I, my right hand with creative stuff, is that we feel so like we're on a treadmill, like trying to catch up content and like making things the day of sometimes. Like actually usually it's the day of. So that's something we're working on. I think there's some magic to it where it's like you're really seeing the thing that we were working on today, the feeling we were thinking about today, the quote that was written today. It's like very but there's also a lot of room for us to grow and be more systemized and organized, because I think that's also healthier for us as a team to feel that weight off our shoulders a bit. But at the moment, it's not very
Wow.
planned out. We have Planoli, which I would recommend, which is where it's called Planoli.
Okay.
Planoli. I think I pronounced it wrong, but you can kind of put a bunch of things on your feed and like see what it would look like and plan ahead. We do vulnerable Sundays once a week, which is really nice to have something that's set. It's every Sunday. I either take a question from the game or I write a new question for the week, and our community like comments together or sends it to their friends. And it's a way to just be authentic and reflect even for just a moment.
Very cool. One last question just about where you're going from here. What's the future of We're Not Really Strangers? Is there plans to build more brand extensions? I saw you did one with Red Table Talk, which is really cool. Other products, and then how does your community figure into that and how you decide to grow?
Yeah, I think we have some really exciting things coming this month, which we've been working on for so long. It's crazy because like with content, it's all about like run and gun and like now. And then with product, I'm learning like how patient you have to be, and how it's like there's this thing I saw where it's like it could either be fast, cheap, or good, but you have to pick two and you can't have all three. You know what I mean? Like when it comes to production, and I really learned that like if you want it good and you want it to be affordable for your customer, it's going to take time. So a lot of things have taken a lot of time and are finally going to start coming out this month. I'll just put it out, like I could tease it here, but we have 2 expansion packs coming out. One is called the Honest Dating expansion pack, which is again, like kind of bringing it back to the roots of when I was first developing the game and going on these dates and feeling like I had to be really filtered with who I was, because I didn't see my perfections as lovable or even acceptable. So this is kind of the anecdote to that. And like, here's a way to just like cut the BS and just like get straight into the realness, but still in a fun way. And then we have one for relationships. So if you've been in a relationship, intimate relationship for a long time, and the whole idea of that is like, what's more romantic than feeling understood? And it's a gateway again to like feeling more understood with your partner. So those 2 things are coming out this month. And then beyond that, I think the thing, because you never know, like things change, your ideas come last minute. But for me, the thing that grounds me is we want to empower meaningful connections. And I think back to McDonald's back in the day, where they had this metric of success, which was how many burgers sold. And they had, who knows what they started with, maybe like hundreds or thousands of burgers sold. And now it's in the billions. And for us, where We're Not Really Strangers, the metric of success is meaningful connections made. How many meaningful connections can we empower, and give people the tools to create for themselves? And that's the thing we're trying to grow. Like I see us as like that number is imaginary in our head. And with every game sold or every conversation, every vulnerable Sunday, that number is growing. So the goal is to just grow that.
Do you have like a tracker? Like how do you actually track that and measure it?
We don't measure it at the moment. It used to be when I first launched the website, it was a tracker of how many games were sold, which of course is only like one way to measure it. So I think right at the moment, it's just more for myself and for my team to like have in the back of our heads. And that number is hard to really calculate, but it's more just a feeling. And it's like this driver, and maybe one day we'll figure out how to calculate it and we can put it out there.
I love that. If you have time for one more question, we have one more audience question, or do you have to drop off? Are you good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So one more question is from Ezra. What are your 3 best tips? Maybe there's 3, maybe there's 100 for asking a good question. Like, what have you learned about what makes for a good question?
I love this question, Ezra. I'm really passionate about it. Okay, so a few things come to mind. One thing is specificity. So I realized like when you're asking a good question, it's important to be specific. So if I were to ask you like, how do you define love? Okay, that's one way. Or if you ask, how do you define love in one word? Your brain kind of filters it a lot faster and it forces people to choose. And like when you're forced to choose, your choice becomes a part of who you are, or who you are in that moment, So I think one of the main things is specifying your question. Two, I would say it's how does the question make you feel when you're asked it or when you ask someone? So when I'm writing questions, a lot of times what I'll do is we're almost like asking the air questions. We're like, is this a good question? And you're thinking, and I'm like, okay, stop that. Let's ask each other the question. And if it makes us feel something or makes us feel, the way I phrase it, sometimes it's like you feel confronted by your own truth. Like someone asks something and you're like confronted by what comes up in you. And that's when it's a good question, versus if you're asked or you ask someone and they're like, I can't really think of it, nothing's coming up. It's because the question isn't filtered enough, specific enough, or hitting enough. So those would be probably the two main things. And then lastly, yeah, I think it's mainly like those two things actually are what I've kind of come to understand is
You could actually write an entire book on writing questions, just with those two questions, the two questions that get to the heart of anything you want to know. Like
yeah,
how to structure them, because I think it would inform so much.
it's really interesting. It's a really fun thing just to play with, Ezra. Like,
yeah,
just kind of write them out and ask yourself, ask other people, and over time you just kind of start seeing what works. It's really fun.
Ezra says, write the book. You should.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation for me to be part of, and to just guide with you and just to open up your brain. And I know that everybody's told me the same thing. So thank you so much for everything you're doing, like for your time today, yes, but for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful. And I will put a recap of our interview, kind of the takeaways and the key insights up on the site in a couple weeks, and I'll send that to you as well. So thank you so much, Corinne. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone viewing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was fun.
So interesting. Awesome. All right. Talk to you later. Have a great rest of your day and weekend.
Bye.
Okay, bye.